My name is Paul Shelley, and welcome to The AstroHistorian. This is a channel dedicated to exploring and explaining the lore of sci-fi and space universes and discussing their impact. Today, we're on the floor of Drake DefenseCon 2956, talking about the ships and the manufacturers on the floor and their lore. Welcome, my name is Paul Berserker01 Batman Shelley, your humble host and space bartender at the Astropub, and yours professor on the AstroHistorian. Apologies, I actually thought I was pushing it to YouTube, and it was not pushing it to YouTube. So, sorry about that, YouTube. I thought I had been streaming to YouTube for about 20 minutes. It wasn't working. Only someone told me a little bit later. Now, people have suggested that I did say that I might cut these into like a longer video, and people said they might like that, so I'm definitely going to be doing that from now on. I apologize for not streaming yesterday. The plan is from now on to stream today, tomorrow, and then Friday. Let me look up the actual schedule for today. All right, so Aegis is tomorrow. Crusader is Friday? Yeah. And then Anvil is Sunday. So yeah, so it'll be today, tomorrow, Friday, and then Sunday for those of you who are in the AstroHistorian. We'll be doing that. And on, I'll edit these together, cut these and edit these together so that on the 26th, on that Tuesday, I'll have released a kind of a complete video for everybody to watch for those who missed the floor tour. So with that being said, though, we're going to be talking about a couple of different ships on the floor. We're going to be talking about MISC, Mirai, Argo, and Greycat. So without any further ado, let's jump to the floor. Alrighty, so because Argo is not on the floor this year, but is still being sold, can still be rented, I'm going to talk about Argo's history first, then Greycat, then MISC and Mirai. So to start off with Argo. Now, Argo is one of the oldest manufacturers in the verse. They are almost as old as RSI. Now, someone did ask me earlier in one of my in the comments on RSI itself, they said, when you say RSI is the oldest company in the verse, do you mean overall or human? And in this case, I'm meaning human, because there are no alien manufacturers on the floor at DefenseCon. As a result, everything I'm referencing to is the UEE or humanity in general. So Argo is the second oldest that we know of, being founded in 2243 in terms of spaceship manufacturers. And unlike other manufacturers, it has a unique history because it started off as a train company. Argo Astronautics starts from, in the 2200s, from its founder, Alana Redmond, and it stems from something called the Trans Am, or the Trans-America Line. The Trans-America Line, let me look at the full name for this. There we go. So the Trans Am ran from as far north as Barrow, Alaska, and as far south as Punta Arenas, Chile. So it went all the way from the top of North America to the bottom of South America. And it was built over decades, if not a century, as a collaboration between all the various governments that the train went through. And for a time, it was vital to transportation throughout North and South America. It was the fastest way to transport goods or materials or people from the different points because it was fast, it was relatively cheap, and was fairly reliable. However, as the years went on and space became more and more available to your average person, the Trans Am became less and less used. In fact, it began to get broken. Things began to break down, track needs to be replaced, but the local governments responsible for replacing those tracks refused to do it because it was much more valuable to invest in space and space technologies than it was to build, to maintain an old train that looked like year on year was looking more and more out of date. In comes Alana Redmond. Her mother had been working on the Trans Am her whole life. So Alana was raised on the Trans Am. So when she left home to go to college, she went and became an engineer and then went back herself to work on the Transamerica line. So she was a train kid from beginning to end, loved trains. However, she could see the trains were suffering. And in one fateful day, the Trans Am, the train she was on, was stopped because the lines were being repaired because of some accident that had happened up ahead. So she was waiting outside of the train while they were repairing the tracks and noticed a piece of scrap metal on the line, which had been, because of the magnetic pressures of the maglev, had been crushed against the monorail as it was. And that maglev train, I think it was maybe not monorail, but the maglev, that piece of scrap metal looked as good of a job in terms of a patch as the engineers, though the professional engineers who would repair these sorts of things, professional mechanics who would repair these sorts of things, would have done. So it gave her an idea. And so she took her entire vacation and all of her savings, rented out a private track that she knew somebody had, and over the course of 6 months, built a prototype that would scan the head of a train to find weak points on a track, and then place down a repair patch in an exact moment so that the maglev forces would weld the piece of scrap metal to the brake or to the weak spot on the track. Effectively, as long as you had one of these systems installed in a train, the train would automatically repair the tracks while it went. This meant that more trains could be running and heavier cargoes and heavier trains themselves, which had been developed but not been implemented on the Trans Am, could be put on the Trans Am because it would basically repair itself as it went. This became so popular that it basically saved trains. Trains began to get more and more use because they were less expensive and they might be a little slower than orbital and suborbital flights, but they weren't that much of a difference. So to sell this new system, Alana Redmond created Argo Transportation. Argo is the first letters of her name, A and R, with go. So it's a portmanteau kind of thing to push everything together. It's my personal belief that this is actually heavily inspired by Avro, which has had a similar naming convention. It's named by the first and last initials of its founder. And for those of you who know, Avro is a famous aviation company founded in the UK. And its probably most famous branch is actually Avro Canada, which created the Avro Aero and a bunch of other experimental planes in the 1960s. So that's likely the inspiration. So I like to say that Argo is a Canadian company. Spiritually, it's Canadian. I'd like to say Alana Redmond is a Canadian. It was a Canadian. That would make sense in terms of keeping the Avro Argo connection. But she didn't stop there. Not only did she save the Trans Am, but she used the profits from the sales of her devices to buy the last train manufacturer. And which was a Japanese train manufacturer. And So thus, by the towards the end of her life, Alana Redmond owned the trains of Earth. She was basically in control of all of the trains and all of the lines of Earth through her slow acquisition of said very lacking at that time industry. So she basically saved the trains industry, and as a result, turned around and owned it. Not only did she save the trains on Earth, but she was also the one to export them to the rest of human space. She personally designed the transportation system, the first transportation system for Mars, in the city of, why am I blanking on the name? Oh, it starts with an R. I've been doing a lot of, Renatus? Yes, Renatus. The Port Renatus. Thank you, Jade. She personally designed the transportation system for Port Renatus, which is the capital city of Mars. And Argo has effectively become the... If you look at a train in the verse, it's probably made by Argo. So the train systems in all of the major Stanton locations are almost certainly made by Argo. The tram system in possibly the Bengal, we know the Bengal has a tram system. That's almost certainly made by Argo. We've seen tram systems in Squadron 42. All of those tram systems are probably made by Argo. Heck, maybe the tram systems in the QV stations are probably also made by Argo, because they really did corner the market on trains and trams. They were the ones who made those systems. But the problem with being so good at making trains is that at a certain point, when something no longer needs to be on a train, it needs to be somewhere else. They have to rely on other manufacturers to produce ships or other transportation vehicles to get it away. And they got so efficient at making stuff with trains that the slowdown became taking the cargo out of trains and bringing it to where it needed to go in orbit. And to counter this problem, Argo decided that instead of relying on other manufacturers to do the job for them, they would buy their own shuttle manufacturer and produce their own solution to the problem. Thus, in 2578, they invented the Orbital Utility Craft, aka the OUC. It used Argo's own proprietary technologies to be able to effectively fly down, latch onto the cargo on top of the train cars, and literally lift it up into orbit. So there was no other ships or anything else was needed. Argo, from the point of it being loaded onto a train, would then take it from the train, load it on, unload the train, and take it to orbit to be picked up by other manufacturer ships. So as a result, Argo Astronautics was born. Now, the OUC proved extremely popular. It served for almost a century, and even after it had been retired, Argo was noticing that the OUC was being used for basically everything it wasn't designed to be used. People were modifying their OUCs to move people, to be rescue craft, to be repair, to be salvage craft. They were modifying to do anything that a short-range hopper shuttle would need to be done in space, which proved how versatile the platform was. But it wasn't, the OUC was never designed for those things. So taking a look at what the OUC was being used for, Argo took the design aspects of the OUC and simplified it to create the multi-purpose utility vehicle, or MPUV. And the MPUV became the main utility vehicle for basically the entire empire, all of human space. It is super cheap, it is super rugged, and it's very simple. Most people who learn to fly spacecraft learn to fly on MPUVs first, because if you flip it, it doesn't hurt the thing. These things are built insanely tough. They're very simple to operate. Yeah. So as a result, having, and because they're cheap, you can have dozens of them on board a space station to work as shuttles, to move cargo around if you need to. They're very, very effective. And because of the back end being entirely modular, as long as you have a module that'll connect to the latch and lock system, you can put it in there. You can invent your own and put it in there as long as it works with that latch. So since then, Argo has really become the, what do we like to call it? The logistical infrastructure company of the verse. They cover basically any and all needs for infrastructure. If you need it to do something to make life easier, and there isn't other equipment for it, they create a spacecraft that'll work for it. But unfortunately, there are no Argo ships on the floor, but you can rent a couple of them on the floor if you'd like to. With that being said, let's move on to Greycat. Move forward a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about this here. So, Greycat. Greycat is a little bit younger, but not by much. It was originally founded in 2337 by a man by the name of Otis Broussard. Now, Otis Broussard was nicknamed Greycat by his own family because he turned gray by the time he was in his 20s. Again, I cannot, I should say, can relate. My hair was gray by the time I was 25. So, but he mostly created mining equipment. So he was one of the early kind of entrepreneurs of Mars to start producing equipment beyond just needed for Mars's survival. So Greycat became sort of a small family-owned niche, but well-respected mining material manufacturer. Drills, armor, equipment, anything you needed for mining, they would produce it and sell it to you. They did okay up until 2380, and that was when Pippa, his daughter, took over control of the company. Now, Pippa, while she was the CEO, Otis remained as the what was it called? The chairman of the board. So while Pippa was nominally in control, her father was constantly looking over her shoulder and scrutinizing what she was doing. So to try to get away from her father and to try to actually make herself kind of breathe, she got permission from the board to open up a second headquarters on Croshaw, specifically because Croshaw had just been terraformed, and she was sort of like, and UNE had just been formed. So she was like, we can take advantage of the sort of colonization fever and open up a new facility on the frontier and as our secondary headquarters, and we could do some more experimentation there we can't do on Mars. That was approved, and to get her to help her figure it out, she contacted a college friend by the name of Reuben Pardue. Now, you have to understand about Reuben Pardue. Reuben Pardue is one of those sort of generational geniuses that is really hard to fathom. Reuben Pardue is probably one of the smartest people that has ever lived in the Star Citizen. Not only was he smart, but he was creative, he was empathetic, he was loyal, he was possibly the most perfect person who have ever lived. I'm over-exaggerating that only a little, but he was one of the first to graduate from the University of Redder. So University of Redder had only been around for a little bit when he graduated, possibly the first class of the University of Redder. And his graduate dissertation was on geohacking. And it was so impressive in terms of terraformation. It was so impressive that Titiana Terraforming contacted him to be part of their endeavor. Now, Titiana was specifically created to terraform Uriel in the Oberon system. Uriel was, and still is, the great enigma of terraforming, because it is technically in the habitable zone, but it is an ice ball. It is very, very cold. So the only way they can heat up, they could terraform it, is extensive work to try to like heat up the core of the planet to hopefully help change the atmosphere. Lots of things had been happening, but they'd been spending a lot of money to do this. And Pardue's ideas on geohacking became the main focus of their attempts to terraform. So they hired Pardue to as their head of the program to sort of mine down towards the core of the planet and then like restart the core. I mean, look at specifically what it was said. Yeah, to raise the core's temperature is basically what it was. So in the time that he was working with Tiziana Terraforming, he spent his free time sketching out ideas because he was constantly befelled by setbacks. He was like, if I just had some equipment to help me out, I'd be able to solve this. So he sketched out a bunch of different things that would help him improve his process. Came up with lots of different ideas. Until May 23rd, 2381. On May 23rd, 2381, he was supervising some mining excavations when the operations hub where he was collapsed. The mine collapsed on top of him, and it killed 37 people and injured dozens more. And he himself was trapped in the rubble. And he barely was able to make it out alive. But not without his left arm being entirely severed. They had to cut off his left arm above the elbow, and which meant that he would have gotten access to prosthetics, but he felt so responsible for the deaths of those people that he refused to get a prosthetic. And this shattered him emotionally and mentally because of what had happened. So he left the program after the failure, took full responsibility for the whole thing, blamed himself for the problems, and became effectively a sort of a wanderer. But hearing his tragic fate, Pippa, who was his friend in college, reached out to him and said, "Hey, I know you're having a rough time. Come work with me. You know, you have some experience with mining. At the very least, I could use your expertise. You're a very smart dude. I like what you did. Come and join me in Croshaw." So he did. He came to Croshaw, and while he was at Greycat, he took all of his ideas that would have made mining better and put them into production as prototypes. The first of which is the Reily armor. The armor we have today is the descendant of the very first dedicated mining armor created by Ruben Pardue himself. And it did pretty well. Lots of integrated stuff helped. Basically, the idea was to protect a miner from cave-ins. If a cave-in happened, they would survive. It wouldn't like prevent them from getting caved in, but it would protect them from dying from a cave-in. But his second invention was far more important because he created the Pyro multi-tool. The very first Pyro multi-tool was invented by Ruben Pardue. And when I say this thing was the most important like creation in the history of humanity in terms of like far-flung colonization efforts, I would be underselling it. Within a year, Greycat was unable to keep up with demand for it. So they spent half their time fighting off rivals who were basically copying the Pyro multi-tool and selling off-brand multi-tools. And it took them almost a century of just fighting in court to try to get these competitors shut down so that they could continue to produce multi-tools so they could protect their own IP. And yeah, as you can tell, the multi-tool is very important. It is the standard kit for any space faring individual in the UEE. It is standard kit for every member of the military. It is the Swiss Army knife of the Star Citizen universe. Now, from there, Greycat continued to coast off of a lot of his ideas. Probably the most famous of his ideas was the PTV, or the Personal Transport Vehicle. The original PTV had an armored roof, but was otherwise fairly open. The idea was it to be small enough to fit into most caves, to be able to transport a couple of miners and their equipment into a cave area. But if there was a cave-in, you would be able to protect a miner's head with the roof wouldn't collapse. They started producing these, we're talking years after Pardew's death. They started producing these and found the workers on the floor were using them as transport vehicles. They would literally, once they got off the floor, they would drive them up and down the factory floor to get from point A to point B because of how efficient it was and how fast and fun it was. And noticing this, the Greycat executive said, why don't we sell this as a, we sell a version of this as just like a pleasure vehicle, like just something that your average person could use. So they removed the armor and the armored roof and sold it to the masses, and now we have the PTV. Since then, Greycat has been mostly known for selling its vehicles. Of course, we have the UTV recently, and the STV, which were all sort of variations on the PTV. Well, obviously evolutions of the PTV. But right now, before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about the Greycat MDC. Now, the MDC seems like it is probably a recent development, but the M series of the MXC series of vehicles is effectively a security version of their utility vehicles. This has got a point defense turret on it for local area defense. And there's a couple different versions of it. There we've got this is the MDC, and the MTC is over here. Which is a patrol vehicle. It has space for a driver, and I think there's a seat for an operator for the guns, and it's got some more stuff in the back, whereas the MDC is more of a single-person operator. There are more versions of the MXC. I don't know what the last one's called. It's not called the MXC. I think it's like the M... can't remember. It's a crafting version. So instead of this back area being a, area for habitation or weapons, it's a crafter, mobile crafter. Any reason to get an MDC over an Ursa? I think the MDC is technically more armored, and I think these are heavier guns on the top. It also is smaller. I think it fits in about the same amount of an Ursa, but I think it has bigger guns. I think I want to say the MCC, but I don't think that's the right one. This is like a mobile crafting. I think that's it for the Greycat on the floor. So let's talk about... Oh, there's the STV. Here's the STV. The STV is sort of like, as I said, it's sort of take the PTV, scale it up, and use it for more off-roading. This is actually a racing vehicle. It's used mostly for off-roading and racing. And the UTV is a more utilitarian version of the STV. The community, for those of you who don't know, calls this the Steve, because it's the STV, which is, kind of abbreviation of Steve. So if you hear people saying, I'm going to get the Steve, or hey, it's a Steve, that's this. It's the STV. All right, let's talk a little bit about MISC. We can get to Mirai as well. So, MISC is a little newer. The best way to describe MISC is that MISC itself was sort of the invention of the fall of the Mezzers. Musashi Industrial Starflight Concern was created between the merger of the failing Utho Electronics Corporation and the Musashi Lifestyle Design Unit spinoff of Acorn Limited. Now, Acorn Limited still exists. I think they make vehicle components. But we don't know why they merged, but we do know that the whole series of ships is said to have been first made in 2803 or 2804, a couple of years before the founding of MISC. So it is likely, this is my interpretation, that the Musashi Lifestyle Design Unit came up with the whole series of ships. Now, why did they invent the whole series of ships? Well, dear viewer, several years before, the last Mezzer, Linton Mezzer, met his demise during the anti-Mezzer Revolution. When the anti-Mezzer Revolution was over with, many of the companies that had supported the Mezzers had disappeared, partially because they were eradicated either through revolutionary investigations or oversight, or because the owners freaked out and fled because they knew that they were going to be investigated and possibly convicted of crimes against humanity. So much of what the empire at that time was using for transportation was gone. Either parts manufacturers or ship manufacturers ceased to exist. Only a handful of ship manufacturers survive, one of which is Aegis, RSI, and others, RSI, Argo, Greycat. These companies existed, but a lot of them had either lost their government contracts, like RSI, Argo, and Greycat had at that point, or were only kept around because of the necessity of them, like Aegis, because pretty much the entire Navy was flying Aegis ships at the time. So it would have made no sense to eliminate Aegis and then have no one to make your replacement parts for your fleet. So, but Aegis had suffered significant losses as a result. Thus, between 2791 and 2800, there was a gap in terms of new ships being built specifically for things like transportation. In steps the Musashi Lifestyle Design Unit. Clearly, the engineers came up with an interesting idea, but they did not have the facilities to produce them at scale. Utho Electronics, which was failing, had the extensive network of factories that could be converted over to producing ships. So they merged together, created MISC, likely specifically to sell the whole series. And the whole series went on to become the staple upon which all trade in the verse is done by. The whole series is one of the most common series of ships in the verse, and MISC themselves came up with the Standard Crate Unit, or the SCU, which has become the standard crate design for the entire UEE. So, if you ever complain about the various sizes of SCU, the 2, 4, or the 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, blame MISC. They're the ones who invented it. So since then, MISC went on to produce many more ships to help flesh out their brand. But MISC's main sort of approach to making manufacturing ships was to seek out a need, do extensive studies and research, and then come to a consensus, yes, this is a need that needs to be done. Then going into extensive design with committees, which each committee deciding what part they need to deal with, and then coming out with ideally the perfect ship by committee that would solve the problem that they're facing. So one of the early things that the designers at MISC realized was that there is a gigantic gap in logistics when it comes to space. This had been a problem forever. This has been a problem in the UEE since practically its founding. There just isn't a lot or enough support networks for spaceships that exists in the UEE, in terms of places you can refuel, places you can just stop and rest, places you can repair or rearm. Aegis attempted to solve this problem with the Vulcan, but the Vulcan is only but one ship. and there hasn't been a extensive refueler, specifically designed fueler ship. There hadn't been for a while. Most of them were just converted haulers. So you can imagine like something like a Hull C being converted to dispensing fuel. Not exactly the most efficient solution. So MISC was one of the first in the modern era to create a specific ship designed to fill that role, which was the MISC Starfarer. Now, the Starfarer was an extensive success, and MISC also knew that based off of their extensive, very careful research, that the Navy also needed a specific cargo or a refueling ship. But here's the kicker. They approached the Navy and said, here is our extensive PowerPoint that explains everything we need to. I'm being facetious a little bit with the PowerPoint, but here's our expensive presentation, which explains all of the details of why you need our ship. Here is all of the problems you're facing. Here's all the solutions this can solve. Here is our design for the perfect militarized version of a ship that you need. And the Navy took one look at them, said, I don't know who you are. Get out of my office. Very confused that the Navy was not going to listen to the very rational and logical arguments they were making, they decided to figure out why this was. Probably doing a couple more committees and researching, because that's how MISC works. They came up with the understanding that they don't understand military procurement, and because they don't have the connections with military procurement, they needed somebody who did. Enter Aegis Dynamics. While they were no longer in the good favor of the UE Navy, the people at Aegis knew who to talk to when it came to the military. So MISC approached Aegis, told them their ideas, and said, hey, if we work together, we can create a vehicle for the Navy, and if you can give us some design points, because you create military ships, so you can understand like what they're looking for, and we need your connections to get in. Aegis took a look at it, basically rubber stamped it, said, this sounds great, let's go. And so they walked with MISC to the Navy, pitched it out. Navy said, this is great, wonderful, we're gonna buy this ship from you, which is the creation of the Starfarer Gemini. I say all of that to get to the Starlight. The Starlight is sort of the latest evolution of that solution, but miniaturized. The idea being is to simplify and streamline the process of refueling to make it easier with a smaller footprint. One of the biggest problems that the UEE has right now, both militarily and domestically, is there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done, but there's not enough people to do it. So by simplifying the process to simply a single person instead of a whole crew, for the value of maybe a single Starfarer, you could probably get at least 2 to 3 Starlights. That's 3 people versus a crew of probably more like 5 or 6. Now, I don't think that the Starlight is capable of refining like the Starfarer is, but you don't need to refine if you're able to, if you're just refueling and then leaving. So let's go in and talk a little bit about the person go. Let's walk inside though and see a little bit about the Starlight itself to show, kind of give you an idea of what's going on. All right, so simple, easy solution. Now, one thing you'll notice right now is this is the classic mailbox slit front. Half of all MISC ships have these. The Starfarer has it, the Freelancer has it, the Starlancer has it, and of course now the Starlight has it. Very common design. You notice that it's got suit locker, it's got engineering terminal, it's got gun racks, and it has easy access to all the components. You don't have to leave at all. Here, we've got the escape pod, which also acts as a bed, storage above it, food replicators, and as my good friend Scooter would say, the Thumper Dumper 5000 here for your hygiene needs, plus a working, look at that, a working mirror. Notice how everything in that is designed to get to accomplish what you want and what you need in a ship. Now, with MISC, let's move on to talk about the other MISC ship. Let me see if there's not another one around here, right? I don't believe there is. Let's go look at Mirai, because I think that's the only MISC ship on the floor. We'll check real quick. MISC Starlight. I think it's just down to Mirai, right? Yeah, the Mirai. All right, let's head over to Mirai. It's funny how committee constantly comes at the conclusion, mailbox slot good. If it works for one ship, why doesn't it work for all the other ones? I always like to bring up the fact that Drake and MISC also have a massive rivalry with one another. And the approach between Drake and MISC is very different. MISC is very calculated and very precise, everything done by committee. Whereas Drake is sort of, what's the vibe going on? Let's put that together. But they end up with very similar outcomes because Drake is also focused on what the people want, but they're going to do it very quickly, and they're going to use what they already have. MISC's going to use what it already has as well, but and they're also focused on what people want. But the difference is one is corporate as heck, and the other one is very seat of the pants, as it were. Is this it? I don't think this is it. I think I went to the wrong slot. Yeah, I went to the wrong slot. All right. This way. One is well done, the other is Drake. All right. So, Mirai is not that much different from MISC. It is, in fact, founded off of MISC, and it is sort of the exotic brand for MISC. The example is, I believe it's Mitsubishi Heavy Industrial is the name of it. Mitsubishi has the Heavy Industrial brand, and then they have their, more other brands as well. MISC is similar to Mitsubishi High. And this specifically, the Mirai brand started off, instead of being part of MISC Heavy Industries, which is what most of the other ships like the Starfarer, the Hulls, those kind of things are all part of MISC High. All the other ships are just more of a generic, I think they call them Built for Life brand. So like the Starlight, the Freelancer, the Reliant, those are all Built for Life, MISC Built for Life. The Fury and the Guardian are part of what used to be known as MISC M, or MISC Mirai, which was originally for Mirai meaning future in Japanese. Remember, MISC is actually founded in Saisei, in the Centauri system. It's heavily influenced by Japanese culture, though it's sort of a mishmash of various different cultures, though mostly Japanese. So, the first MISC M ship was known as the Daedalus. because the CEO at the time, Corey Desmond of MISC, was a huge racing fan. I mean, massive racing fan. So he wanted MISC to create a ship that would specifically win the Murray Cup. However, at the time, they lacked the expertise and the technology to really build racing ships. So the first ship they built, the Daedalus, was a disaster and barely got off the ground and didn't win many races. However, that team continued to stick around. And when MISC managed to get a hold of a very lucrative contract with the Xi'an Empire, specifically Aopoa, they managed to, early on, before most of the trade agreements had been signed, this is a whole big thing to understand. Gatak, House Gatak, and the Gatak brand went to Aopoa and said, hey, we know that MISC wants better efficiency in terms of engines and better maneuverability in terms of engines because of MISC M. You have both of those things, and we want the plans for the whole series because we want to see how efficient the whole series is. So they had Aopoa reach out to MISC so that they could do a technology swap. In exchange for Xi'an technology when it came to their multi-thrust vectoring technology and their efficient engines, MISC would give the full rights for the Xi'an Empire to produce their own version of the whole series of ships. Now, it's likely that this trade was specifically spurred on to the creation of the I'm always going to forget the name of it. I always mess up the name anyways. The Reily? I don't know how to say it properly. The Reily. The Reily is sort of the Xi'an took a look at the design specs for a hull and went, what if we made our own version of the hull? So that's sort of the Reily is the direct result of this technology exchange. But now that MISC had access to engineers and schematics for engines that Aopoa would create, MISC decided to take another crack at their Daedalus project, creating the MISC Razor. The Razor became very, very good at racing. It used a lot of the technology for engine thrusters and such. And because it became so good at what it did, they decided to spin off that brand into its own brand in the 2940s called Mirai. So Mirai is now a standalone brand owned under the MISC umbrella, but it is its own separate brand that heavily uses Xi'an technology. After the Razor, they came out with the Fury, which is fairly recent. This is a snub ship designed to fit in pretty much anything you can put it in to be a force multiplier, especially for industrial ships that might be in dangerous locations. Having a bunch of these is a great sort of counter to any pirates that might show up if you don't have mercenaries to call upon. This is the MX version of the Fury, which replaces all of the guns for missiles. The next, they stepped it up to creating the Guardian. The Guardian is a heavy fighter, utilizing all of the things that they had learned from the Xi'an, plus everything they had learned from manufacturing ships themselves. So it is very maneuverable, but it is very big and can hit very hard. This is sort of, at the moment, the pinnacle of that technology exchange. A true human-Xi'an hybrid when it comes to designs. This ball cockpit here that you see here is the epitome of the Aopoa design when it comes to cockpit design. The Kar-2-Al and the Santokyai both have this cockpit design as part of their design. This is unique to the Mirai brand, stealing similar things. And here in the back, you can see really the engines. Notice how these engines are sort of on a swivel. These engines can also act as maneuvering thrusters if angled properly. So this is taking the idea of a Xi'an ship, but then compacting it into a human-sized platform, because usually Xi'an ships are very vertical, human ships are very lateral. So I think lateral is the right term, horizontal, I guess. So this is sort of that fusion. For those of you who are Mass Effect fans, this is like the original Normandy of Turian human design meshed into one. This is that right now epitome of that. You're forgetting about the Reliance series. Now, the Reliance series is the first true crack at that attempt, but the Reliance is still part of the Built for Life series. All right, let's go over here and we'll take some questions. Hey, Bobs, how you doing? So is the Twitch flight tied to this lore? Yes, it is. The flight suit you see that you can get from the Twitch drops right now is is based off the Murray Cup. It's sort of a Murray Cup liveried version of suits that are worn by the racers. There is actually a racing suit you can find as well, that you can get as well, which is more designed specifically for the racing. But that Murray Cup design one you can get with the Twitch drops, that is in fact connected to that lore. The Murray Cup is a race. It's probably the premier race, sort of the Indy 5000 in the United States. I can't remember. It's the pinnacle of all racing achievement in the UEE. It takes place in the Ellis system. Yeah, it's just a very prestigious race to race in, and if you win a Murray Cup, it's very big news. And every ship manufacturer that produces racing ships tries to produce a ship that can win the Murray Cup. Origin does it. Obviously, MISC does with Mirai. Kruger does with its the Merlin series was an attempt, or not, the Archimedes is the racer. I want to say what are the other racers out there? Consolidated Outland with the Omega. There's references to an RSI team that does racing, but we haven't seen any RSI racers. So Aegis with the Peregrine, the Saber Peregrine, all sorts of things. If you have any questions about lore, please let me know. I'll do my best to help out. Thoughts on Argo entry at Ironclad size? I think it would work. An Argo entry at the size of... This man's been trying to give me beer this entire time. The Argo entry at the size of an Ironclad would work if it was sort of a flying refinery, maybe a repair bay. Is there lore support for that? Of course. Argo is a it is a logistics brand. Its brand is based around making life easier where you don't have those specific things. Like the MPUV is designed as a multi-purpose utility vehicle to pick up slack, but you've got the SRV, which is designed to recover vehicles and bring them back to a location for repairs. You've got the Raft, which is designed as a short-term cargo transport, but it's mostly from like orbit to ground or from local area. The other one that's a little off is the Mole. I guess now the what's the new one that they did? The Moth. Those don't really work because they're not really designed, but they kind of work with that. Cheers. Yeah, something like this. Something like an Argo Ironclad would have to be a logistics base of some kind. So salvage, repair, refining, crafting, that sort of thing. It would have to be a multitude of things. It probably wouldn't carry a lot of cargo. Would probably more be focused on the sort of like a flying base, something you'd put down while you're building a base, crafting things, like shoving things into refined stuff all at the same time. So you could have like refine it and then pop it out and then immediately throw it into a crafter and build something to support the industry of an area. Kind of like a mini Pioneer, only you probably wouldn't build bases, though I guess it could build a base. Do you agree that the pilot captain chair and the Argo and the Ironclad should be the main bridge with the gunners? Yes and no. The thing you got to understand about the about Drake is that, like I said, Drake and MISC are very similar. Mailbox slit works. It's good. Drake for the longest time was people would joke that every Drake ship is just a different version of the Cutlass. Like that's an in-lore joke, is that every Drake version is every ship that Drake makes is just a different version of the Cutlass. Because they kept doing that. They kept like cutting the Cutlass up and putting it into different configurations and trying to win UEE military contracts and kept failing. Because the UE military is like, that's just the Cutlass, Drake. Okay, that's just the Cutlass. Stop giving us the Cutlass. So the idea of the command module means that Drake is going, we can just build something and then attach the command module to it. So we only have to build one command module and build at this point 3 different platforms. But I guarantee you this is not the last platform that Drake will make that has a command module attachment to it. We'll probably get smaller versions, larger versions, weird versions, because Drake is all about that efficiency. That's funny lore. I never knew it existed. See, that's why it's curious. Like watches Astro. MISC and Drake hate each other because they're the same company. It's just Drake doesn't care and MISC really cares. But at their heart, they're both very worried about like efficiency and using as little resources as possible for the maximum profit possible. The Ironclad is the 3 Cutlasses and trench coat. Why work harder when you can work smarter? That's the idea. One of the things you'll notice with Drake as well is that they basically have like 3 or 4 engines that they constantly reuse. Which again, makes sense. Even in modern day, most engines, a lot of engines you have on modern rockets are just copies of other engines that have already worked, or the same engine that has already worked for other rockets. Same thing with, I believe jet engines are similar. Like a lot of planes use like some of like the 3 or 4 different versions of a jet engine that works. There's probably more than that, but I know for the longest time, the United States was sort of the lead manufacturer of jet engines because we would produce most of the jet engines that the rest of the world would use. Similar to that. If it break broke, don't fix it. It's another good reason about this is, and this is connected to a video that I'm making right now, is that artificial intelligence in the Star Citizen universe was developed and was very advanced very early on in human history, but it kept screwing up and killing everyone, or at least people would blame it for killing everyone. So as a result, it's been banned pretty much extensively for the entirety of the of human space for 600 years, 700 years. So for almost 1,000 years. So as a result, everything has to be done by very simple systems or by hand. And what I mean simple systems is, I believe, based off of the lore, that even modern LLM and other sort of machine learning systems would have probably be banned in the Star Citizen universe. Like they would be either highly regulated or entirely banned. Because there are systems that were mentioned in the Star Citizen lore. These systems existed, but these were the first AI systems that would start screwing up and killing people. So when the AI has secret apocalyptic intentions, it's not really that they have secret apocalyptic intentions. It's that like the first AI screw up was when a Japanese motor company, a company that makes like motor vehicles, came up with a artificial intelligence system that they claimed was as responsive as a normal human, or better, in fact, than a normal human. And the city of Tokyo purchased a bunch of their buses that they had built and vehicles to try to help service areas of Tokyo outside of or far away from train stations. And one day, a bus decided to just go drive off the side of a cliff into the ocean. And then another one did a couple of minutes later. And by the time the city of Tokyo realized that all of these automated systems were just crashing into things or flying off of cliffs, it was starting too late. The company hit an emergency shutdown, like shut down all of this system. And while most of the systems were able to finish their drive safely, all of them refused the shut off command. Basically, the company said, stop what you're doing right now. And all of their cars said no and continued their journey. But once they reached the end of their journey, then they acknowledged the command. So, and in the process, more cars decided to fly directly into other vehicles, or into the side of buildings, or off cliffs, killing their passengers. It's called the Lemming Car Incident. So, and not only was it the only one, there were two other ones. One in, I want to say, Johannesburg, and the other in New York, where a similar companies had attempted similar systems, and they did the exact same thing. And so by that point, this was like the end of the 21st century. Humanity was just like, there was so much sourness on artificial intelligence that nobody was willing to invest money into AI, because AI had such an awful reputation with the general public. And so when I say like these systems existed, these systems are not that much different from modern systems that we see are arguing for today for things like military and civilian use. But in the universe of Star Citizen, no one wants to use them anymore because they have a reputation of failing. I think Cyberpunk 2077 has a story like this. Ironically, what's the name of the taxi system that's run by an AI? I can't remember the name of it, but ironically, there is in the Star Citizen universe, there is an AI that developed. Star Citizen domination is even more primitive than pre-LLM tech. We have IRL. Yes, effectively. Delamain, thank you. That Delamain was the cyberpunk version. But yeah, so everything is done manually. So if I say all of that to explain to you that if Drake is going to produce a vehicle, it's going to try to be as efficient as possible in producing the vehicle, so that they can mass produce lots of them. And most of the manufacturing companies are going to be very reticent to produce brand new versions of ships. So as a result, some ships, like the Gladius, for instance, are hundreds of years old, but they've been updated incrementally over the years. So the modern Gladius is very different from the first Gladius, but they share basically the same chassis, because the chassis and all the parts that make up the chassis are easy to find, easy to manufacture and supply. History of the Freelancer line. Freelancer is the first commercial vehicle, like individual commercial vehicle that MISC made. Before that, they'd only made heavy industries, but they came out with the Freelancer as sort of a everyman version of their own ships. Did really well. I think it came out in the early 2900s, so early 30th century. It was the one that built the Built for Life campaign that has been used by a lot of other MISC ships from since then. It is built using some Xi'an technology. It was built after the connection with the with Aopoa. So, and I believe it's the engines that are mainly influenced by the Xi'an. But there was another attempt at the same time when the Freelancer was made. There was a competitor to it, which was the predecessor to what is the modern day Reliant. That predecessor that was trying to use more of the Xi'an technology and design styles, but it was, imagine a Reliant the size of a Freelancer. It was huge. It wasn't very well liked by the design and had a lot of problems because it was using a lot of ideas which were brand new to MISC. So it was sidelined for Freelancer itself. But the Freelancer itself was built. There are many different versions of the Freelancer. There are early versions of the Freelancer, which are different from modern version of the Freelancer. And the Max, MISC, and DUR are all built recently. The DUR, the MISC itself was actually built as an attempt to sell the ship to the UEE. The idea was that they would build a ship using the Freelancer as a basis so that they could sell it to the UEE for convoy defense. So they pitched it to the UEE as a cheap convoy defense ship. Everyone knew how to fly a Freelancer. It's fairly small, only requires a small number of crew, so they could at least use it for merchant marines, and the UEE rejected it. But it became a militia ship nonetheless. Just like airplanes now, they've been made for decades with some upgrades in between. Effectively, that's the actual design inspiration behind how old these ships are. For instance, to give you the thing I always like to point out is the F-15 was first produced in the early 70s. There is a version of the F-15 that was released like 3 or 4 years ago, which is brand new with brand new technologies, but it's effectively the same airframe as the one that was built in the 1970s. Completely different internally, but it is still an F-15. The B-52 is the most famous one. It was produced in, I think, 1952, and those same B-52s, which were produced in 1952, are still flying today, with, in fact, multiple generations of the same family flying in the same B-52. It's just that that B-52, when it was released in 1952, is not the same B-52 that's flying in 2026. They've been updated, retrofitted, changed over, but it's outside, it's the same frame. Yeah, the C-130 is produced in 1954. The Arleigh Burke was produced in the 1970s. The Abrams was first produced in the 1970s. Like, we're not talking about vehicles and ships and planes which are brand new. They just simply get modernized over time. But there are no new B-52 frames. Correct. Yes, they simply updated the interiors. Am I getting an Odin? No, I'm not. Where do you think we get the B-52 that's flying in 2956 in the game? The two things I want CIG to do is add a B-52 as a flyable plane, as a flyable ship in the verse, and also to make the heavy machine gun in Star Citizen just the M2, the M2 Browning, and just have it be the M2 Browning. It's just the Browning. I believe the new one is the EX. Yeah. Is there lower for the Odin? No, it's brand new. Just recently being produced. So. You found your ship you crashed 3 days ago? That's Star Citizen for you. I think the only other ones that I think would be realistically still around in the 30th century would be an AK platform and the M1911. Those being in the game would make a lot of sense as well. because the M1911 is a Colt. And I don't mean that in terms of the manufacturer. I mean the ULT. That's Star Citizen for you, Gene Blank. You will crash your ship, and sometimes your ship and your body will be around for weeks afterwards because the servers will stay up now for much longer. What's the lore for the Tiburon? We don't have any real Tiburon lore, but the fun fact about the head, it's part of Project Monitor, which was an attempt to create a picket ship for anti-fighter screens and patrols to replace a cargo ship converted to that role. Those are talking about like the end of the Messer era, so I want to say off the top of my head like 2750, 2760. No, it was probably later than that. 2780 would be my guess. Because one Jude Harris Arnold, or J. Harris Arnold, was one of the lead chip designers for Project Monitor, which was eventually became the Hammerhead. Why Jude Harris Arnold is important is because he's the founder of Anvil Aerospace. He first got his job working at Aegis, working on the Hammerhead. And his prototype for the Hammerhead almost made it through, but failed some of the last tests. So my headcanon for the Tiburon is that the Tiburon is J. Harris Arnold's Hammerhead. It is the Hammerhead that J. Harris Arnold wanted to produce, and then they retrofitted it into the laser battery that it is today. Are you hoping Tiburon gets lore back to the same era as the Hammerhead? Or it could be a modern version, but I could see them doing a refit. Will be neat to see if they put shows in separate systems next year. I think they could do a Invictus and Castra, and a DefenseCon in Stanton still. How much do you think that Hammerhead version 2 is? What, the Tiburon? I don't know. As expensive as the Hammerhead. I was surprised with the Starlight. The Starlight's price being significantly lower. Nope. The AK literally is in the game already? Kind of. The kill shot is not an AK, but it is a spiritual AK. The Space K is what a lot of people like to call it. Can you take a guess on what life was like for the Tevarin that live in Xi'an space? Have they tried to assimilate similar to those that live in UEE? My guess is no, because the Xi'an are very untrusting of outsiders. While they do accept outsiders into the UE, into they're like humans who've lived with the Xi'an Empire, they keep them at arm's distance, and the Xi'an are very careful at where these people live. So I would be very surprised if the Xi'an were actively still helping the Tevarin in a way that wasn't just trying to keep humanity off balance. Because for those of you who don't know, when the Tevarin lost the first Tevarin War, they fled their homeworld, which had been invaded and conquered by humanity. They didn't really have any colony worlds at that time. Oh, they did, but Cabal had been abandoned by that point. So most of them fled to areas outside of human control, many to the Xi'an Empire, some to the Banu space, some to Xi'an Empire. And it's probably almost certainly that Korthal, the warlord who would unite the Tevarin for the Second Tevarin War, likely fled to the Xi'an Empire, and the Xi'an gave them assistance so that they could reform the Tevarin Empire. Because by the time the Second Tevarin War kicks off, it is well into Messer II's reign. Messer I, who was a gigantic threat to the Xi'an Empire, had died, and right when the young, I think not Ivar. Ivar was the first one. Corson, I want to say. The Ivar's son, when he was still new to the job, is right when the Second Tevarin War happens, which is almost a perfect timing to test the young new Mezer. And again, the Xi'an always think 5 steps ahead. This was likely a plan the Xi'an had in the first place, not necessarily to attack humanity, but to give shelter to the Tevarin to allow them to build up their forces so that when the time was right to strike, they would just go, it's good for you to go now, enjoy, and suggest that they move on. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Tevarin were actively aided and supported by the Xi'an. But today, I don't think the Xi'an are that supportive of the Tevarin, simply because they don't really have a need for the Tevarin to keep the UE off balance. What conflict started the first war? We don't know, but almost certainly, based off of what we know, it was the Tevarin. The Tevarin likely ambushed or attacked the first contact fleet from humanity and started to invade human space because they had been unified as one people through military action fairly recently, only for maybe a century. So they were experiencing what humanity was experiencing many years before, which is an overpopulation crisis, where before the unification, the Tevarin's species was kept in check because they were constantly fighting each other. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Tevarin end up having lots and lots of children because biologically they're supposed to die. So you can imagine finally stabilized, everyone's having kids, but there is no death. They're not being sent off to fight. They're not dying because of natural causes. So you have this huge surge of population and not enough resources to go around, and a very restless population of warriors who are looking for fights to happen, and they don't exist. In walks the UEE, stumbles into their system, clearly lower technology than them when it comes to fighting, but having the technology to terraform worlds, which the Tevarin didn't have. So the Tevarin, what we do know is the Tevarin definitely started the war because they wanted human territory, because they could live in human territory, in human environments. So they wanted to seize the lands, the planets that humanity already had and terraformed for their own. And it worked well, except for the one problem that the Tevarin didn't realize was that because they hadn't really known humanity when they attacked them, they didn't understand that humanity are stubborn. We are extremely stubborn when it comes to warfare. And so they, for instance, when they invaded and conquered Locke, they fully expected the civilian population to either flee or submit to Tevarin rule. They did not expect the remaining human population to run to the hills, grab guns, and then start a guerrilla war against them, because they didn't have the concept of guerrilla war. It wasn't in their culture. Their culture is that once you've attacked and conquered an enemy, your job as the conqueror is to take care of the conquered population as your people. They become your people. And the people who are conquered are expected to submit to the conquerors because now they will be integrated into society. Humanity was not having any of that. So they were very surprised when these teachers and steel workers and farmers were suddenly throwing grenades at them instead of welcoming them. We're blowing up their communications platform, for ambushing their transports instead of giving up. And while humanity was woefully under equipped to fight the Tevarin, a Tevarin Talon is very good, but I don't know how long a Tevarin Talon can last when it's fighting against 20 snub ships. Yeah, the snub ships, you might take out a couple of those snub ships, but eventually just the volume of fire from those snub ships are going to take out your Talon. So they just didn't have the same sort of volume of equipment or the volume of people that humanity had. They had one planet, which was overpopulated. Humanity had 36 planets many of which had reached the billions of population levels. So do the math. Humanity just outnumbered them by a lot. Later, Meltmar. Thanks for hanging out. Oh, are we have a sub train going on? Oh, I just missed it. Thank you, Mason, for that 60 months. 100 bits from Meltmar. Wahoo for that 56 months. Swagasaurus Rex for that 29 months. I didn't see that race shrub 43 months. This is very much time to come back to Star Citizen if there's not enough MISC to go around for this. Thank you, Extreme Tuber. Oh, and Night Cop. Holy shit, over 4 years. My goal is to make it as a sub over 3 different commands duty stations. Thank you, 50 months there, Night Cop. And of course, High Prince of Jakun for the huzzah. Don't mess with the wrong primates. To give you the context, though, if it wasn't for Ivar Mezer, his last stand on Idris 4 lock, humanity, the First Varan War would have been lost. Like, effectively, humans, UNE, or UPE at the time, UPE Navy, the UPE military was like, we are fighting at a standstill. They managed to stop the Devaran advance, but the lines were stabilizing and they were reaching a stalemate. And the high command was like, we need a punch. We need to just punch through Devaran lines and really knock them off balance and like push them out. And the place that they could punch them was the one place that the Devaran had gotten a foothold, which was Idris. Now, it helped that Idris 4, aka Locke, it was named Locke afterwards because the head of the resistance was named Rachel Locke. It's named after her. Rachel Locke and her Greys, which is the name of the resistance movement, were actively communicating with the UPE Army and Navy, try to tell them, like, hey, this is what's going on down here. And so they were observing some major construction going on Locke, and they knew that the window for actually liberating Locke was getting smaller and smaller. So they decided to just send it. And so the plan was to just push through the jump point, barrel through the fleet that was defending Locke, and then create a line of ships that would protect the route from the jump point to the planet. And then that line, as it extended, with the transport ships would go behind it out of the jump point and hit the planet and then land. That worked until it didn't, because the things that were being built on the planet was a gigantic planetary defense system that could be aimed at the ships. So while the initial landing went really smooth, everything else didn't, because the second they landed on the spaceport that the Tevarin had been building, and to conquer it, they immediately got surrounded and counterattacked. All of the capital ships were getting just blown to pieces by the orbital defense systems. The general who was in charge of the landing forces got killed. Then the colonel who was under him got killed. Then the lieutenant colonel got killed. Then the major got killed, and it left one captain remaining. I think it was the 19th EU division, the EU 19th Infantry Division, I think something like that. Captain Ivar Mezer. He was the only, the highest ranking commanding officer left. Things were just fucked. And he was actually smart enough to understand what was going on. And so he basically requested airstrikes from the only ship that could survive the onslaught, which was the Retaliator, because it was the only ship that of its size that had a shield generator, to basically just start dropping bombs and torpedo strikes on their position to try to stop the advance of the Tevarin. So they're basically bombing themselves to stop the Tevarin advance. And this would happen every minute they possibly could. So every single Retaliator bomber was just dropping. Now that we know that it has size 3, size 5, and size 3 and size 5 bombs, just imagine a fleet of those, or a squadron of those dropping, of those 112 size 3s, all of them dropping, just carpeting an area for hours constantly. And it was only because of a Marine, Sergeant Adam Core, who was friends, or was not friends, but was a close associate of Ivar Mezer. They got a Tavaran skiff sent, and him and his Marines, basically Marine Raiders, he sent them out to go find the. They knew generally where the command structure of the orbital bombardment was, or the orbital defense system was. Sent him out because they now knew that was the command structure. They just knew it was a command structure. They didn't know what it was based off the reports. Now they knew. Sent him out. He went off and then turned the guns onto the Tavaran, and that was the only thing that saved them. So yeah, so like Ivar Mezer kept cool under pressure, understood the tactical and strategic realities that he was in, turned the tide of the battle, risking his own life while doing so, and broke the back of the Tavaran. If it wasn't for his quick thinking and his strategy, humanity would have lost. Which is the reason why the high command realized this motherfucker knows what he's doing. Give him a command. So he jumped from captain to colonel after that battle, and was given command of a lot of the invasion forces and the theater of operations against the Tavaran, and proved to be extremely good at what he did. Eventually leading the invasion of the Tavaran homeworld, capturing the warlord, the Tavaran leader, and bringing them before the Senate to end the war. So you can imagine that this dude who literally saved humanity's butt was kind of popular amongst humanity. So it makes sense that this dude would end up becoming a popular dictator, because he was pretty good at what he did. And every single alien species, save for the Banus, the Tavaran and the Xi'an, were terrified of this man. Yeah, he's literally Julius Caesar. Who's based off of, is Julius Caesar. One hell of a promotion. Hey, field promotions are a thing, especially when the entire command structure is now dead. Being the highest ranking infantry officer or ground-based officer, or military or army commander, I guess in this case, where everyone else is dead and backup is days away, you gotta get field promoted. How did Bishop rise to admiral? We don't know, but he is considered the reincarnation of Alexander the Great. Like that's his reputation in the UE. He is very well loved by his men. His men would follow him to hell and back, kind of thing. He's got a hell of a reputation. Pretty much every person who has served or is serving under his command has basically said he's the only one who knows how to fight the Vanduul, because he's the only one who really recognizes the Vanduul way of war, and every other UE commander is deluding themselves in what they think they can do. Could Bishop be the next Mezer? Easily. He's got the cult of reputation, the cult of personality. He just lacks the ambition. So who are the Vanduul analog? The Mongols, the Huns, or the Vandals? The actual Vandals. CIG isn't subtle with the naming. The Vandals, the Goths, the Visigoths, They're sort of the stand-in for the Germanic and Plains tribes of, or the Plains tribes, the steppe tribes that came into the Roman Empire. Any other questions? Sorry, I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I know y'all like that, so. I would say that Bishop reminds me more of the famous Stoic emperor, Marcus Aurelius. I'd say, yeah, Bishop reminds me more of Marcus Aurelius, and that same or Constantine, in the sense that he's like a very well thought general, has a good head on his shoulders, wants to think more than just himself, but is also pressured into leadership beyond what he needs to. Those like Flavius Attius. How long do people live in the Star Citizen universe? They've been known to live up to 150 years with the right medical attention, but it's very common for people to die of things like preventable cancer. Stuff we have cures for now. They didn't just disappear; they still exist. Those cures still exist in the Star Citizen. But people's access to medical really determines their like the founder of Rough and Ready died of, I think, pancreatic cancer when he was 50 because he lived in Pyro, you know. But some people can live up to 150 years. The current CEO of Crusader Industries became CEO of Crusader in like 2850. She's still the CEO 100 years later. She's like 120. Like she personally knew August Dunlow. August Dunlow hired her. She was the head of the Genesis Starliner program. Like when she was a young engineer. She's also the designer of the C1. She didn't personally design it, but she helped design the Spirit series. Kelly Kaplan. Looks good for her age, too. I'm going to pull up a picture of her so you can see. She's 111 years old. She was born in 2845. That's what she looks like. Oh, my camera's all messed up. There you go. Again, not bad for 111. Do people become frail or just die suddenly at 150? 150 seems to be the age that, like, I think CIG chose that because most modern like extrapolations or attempts at seeing say that like most your body itself is designed to live fairly long. If it isn't for things like cancer or things breaking down, your organs and your body should be able to exist for about 150 years. And I think that was what they're basing it off of. So based off of what they've said about aging, I imagine it's just like your body just starts collapsing at 150. It's not like you grow pale. It's like you can stay pretty young. It's just your body just gives out. CEO as a teenager. So she became CEO in 2863. So she would have been in her early 20s by then, I think. In 2865, she purchased Crusader. She's the one who actually purchased Crusader. I said 2850 because I think that's when I was confused when the Stanton planets were settled by the corporations versus when it was discovered. I think it was discovered like 2850, 2852. So. Could the genotractic leadership of thing holding Crusader back? Probably, honestly. Does regen work into a younger body? No. So regen is not a de-aging device, nor is it an immortality device. The way it works is because it's built off of alien technologies we don't fully understand, we just know it works. It creates a link between your brain and a device called the Ibrahim sphere. So an Ibrahim sphere is named after Dr. Aka Ibrahim, who developed it. And the Ibrahim sphere itself was developed using Vanduul technology, captured Vanduul technology that was reverse engineered into a scanner. Long story about the Aka Ibrahim. He wanted to like solve traumatic brain injuries. So he was very good at medical scans and stuff like that, but he was never able to restore someone's personality and memories from when they got injured. He became obsessed with like TBIs. So when they discovered these advanced medical scanners on Vanduul ships, he sort of took that technology and tried to reverse engineer it, eventually getting, as they got more and more piece of that technology from other raids and other experiences, which some people are theorizing right now is the plot for part 2 and part 3 of Squadron 42 involves the acquisition of these technologies. Because they seem to be very purposely put at different points in the timeline. It's like, oh, CIG already had these things built out. So, but effectively, we know it works. We don't know fully how it works, but it uses a concept in Star Citizen called interspace, which is sort of a kind of like slip space in Halo. I think it's called subspace in Star Trek, hyperspace in Babylon 5. It's sort of like a smaller version of a dimension that sort of sits on top of our dimension, but it's smaller. It's how jump points work. So you're constantly connected to this Ibrahim sphere through interspace, and it updates your memories. So once you've imprinted, it'll update everything that you experience at that point. But the longer you go without imprintation, the more degraded it gets. But you're constantly updated back and forth. So your aging, your experiences, your memories constantly get imprinted back. And the only way you can regen is when you die, that connection is severed, and that allows you to be regened with the last memories that you had that was sent back to the Ibrahim sphere. So it doesn't bring you back younger, it brings you back the same age, but it also brings you back all of the trauma you experienced. And in fact, the process of dying is very traumatic, and it creates these things called echoes or trauma echoes, which sort of imprint in your brain. Effectively, you can think of it as like PTSD. Your brain is constantly getting bombarded by this trauma that it can't process and it can't understand. So it starts to reject portions of yourself. So say you lose an arm and you don't die, but you lose an arm. And then when you come back to life, if your imprint was working, your arm would regen, but your brain would reject the idea that you have an arm. So your arm would be regened worthless. You couldn't move the arm. So they'd have to sever the arm and then implement a prosthesis to let you be able to function properly. And so that leads to what's called your imprint viability score, or IVS. So your imprint viability score goes down every time you die until the point where you are so low in the imprint viability score that it's impossible to bring you back, because you come back as a vegetable, effectively. You wouldn't be able to process anything. So it doesn't fully revive you in the sense of bringing you younger or like clone you. It's more of a kind of like sleeves in Altered Carbon, but much shittier. Are they linked in a way that you can live digitally, or is there a queue? You can't live digitally. The connection is both directions, and we don't know how it functions. We just know it exists. So you can't, like, because they've tried doing things like making an imprint and then printing another copy of you, and it doesn't work because the brain, the imprint will not stick to the body. So you can make a clone of yourself or a copy of yourself, but won't have a brain, won't have a conscience because it's not connected to you yourself. So it requires death to sever that connection. But you get a new body when you die, and if so, why would that fix anything wrong with it? It's because of your brain, because of the trauma that you've undergone throughout your life, especially in death, that your brain literally rejects the idea. You're effectively giving yourself mental illness by regenerating. What about Sam at ASD? So Sam at ASD is likely an experiment done by Dr. Yorit. If you've been to the ASD facilities, you see a dude who's walking around in like a hospital gown. I think he has a gun. He tries to shoot you, and he starts screaming like, "Do it again!" He's actually a human Vandal hybrid. So Dr. Yorit spliced his DNA, one of his imprints with Vandal DNA, and it seems to have made it so that there is no traumatic echoes, or the echoes don't affect him as much. But you can also kind of see what trauma echoes does. The fact that he's freaking the fuck out and just screaming randomly, that's trauma echoes. His brain is gone. He's not there anymore. Because he's died so much, he doesn't exist as a person. But he's still able to regen, but he can't comprehend. He's just gone, just completely left to his own demons, sort of thing. His mind is broken. Excuse me, his name is Gary. How do you know all this? I love it. So some of that stuff about Sam is just, if you go to the ASD facilities, there are audio logs you can listen to that are discussions between Dr. Yorit and Sam, but there's also other audio logs where Dr. Yorit talks about his experiments and how he's in love with Vandal tech. And if you actually observe Sam, you actually see he's got a Vandal eye and he's got some Vandal scales on his body. The regen stuff is all stuff that was released in a big document on regen when they first introduced the idea. They have a whole lore dump on that. A lot of this stuff is just stuff that's been available online on the website for a while. We haven't heard anything about the fast travel yet now. Can they use cloned organs to replace parts affected by bad IVS scores? Possibly. The writers have left it open so that there is a way that you can actually reverse your IVS score so that you can actually improve it. The IVS score is your death score. The way I like to describe it is this whole thing is set up where you have a soft health bar and you have a hard health bar. Your soft health bar is your current living health bar when you get the 100% to zero. When you die, then that death, whatever happens with that death, takes place. Your IVS score then starts going down because of the regen. Depending on how you die, how far you die, how recently you died, how recently you imprinted, all sorts of things will impact your IVS score going down. And once you've reached zero, then you have to create a new character. Your new character inherits everything of what you already had, but there's like a death tax, so you lose some money and that kind of stuff, some reputation and such. But it's sort of a way of making you keep your character. So you can keep your character, but they also want you to kind of care about your character. One of the things they said that they want to be able to do is you be able to do some experimental technologies to increase your IVS score so that your IVS can go back up if you do specific things for specific groups. So it's possible to stay alive to keep your IBS score high, as long as you are doing the work you need to do. But it's going to require you to probably pay money and then have high reputation with certain groups. Yeah, this is all called Death of the Spaceman. Have I given refueling shot and gameplay since MISC Day? I have not, no. I remember the lore fact finding mission to the ASD facility. Yeah, Mason, you were part of that, where we were going there and we were getting all the audio logs and I was getting footage of Gary and all that kind of stuff. So SC Accelerator, check out the DefenseCon, which you're watching this on YouTube, so you're watching the DefenseCon. Check out the my videos here. I do lots of videos that are specifically on Star Citizen lore. I have one that's called The Complete History of Star Citizen Lore, which takes you from the origins of Star Citizen, like where our history runs into Star Citizen's history, all the way up. Currently, it goes all the way up to just before the First Tavaran War. So it covers about 500-ish years. The goal is that eventually it's going to go all the way up to the modern day, to the 2950s and 2960s. But there's a lot of lore in between. So each of those episodes is 45 minutes long, and there are currently 5 of them. And one of them covers like 30 years to give you how much information, how much story and lore there is in this game as it is. It's just we don't see a lot of it because CIG hasn't implemented it in game. So if you get blown into a red paste instead of bleeding out from a gunshot, it really bring down your score. I imagine it's a lot more traumatic to have your brain get exploded by a railgun than it is for you getting shot in the gut and slowly bleeding out. So I'm sure both of them are traumatic. Why are the Vanduul attacking UE space? That's a good question. We don't know. Because a lot of the space that the Vanduul are invading is very old UE space. Virgil, for instance, has been part of the UEE for probably 700 years, or part of humanity's space for 700 years. Same with Oberon, same with Vega, same with pretty much almost all of the Vanduul attacks have been in places where humanity had been a very, very long time. So we don't know where they came from. We don't know why they're attacking humanity, other than the Vanduul like to fight. But we don't know what's pushing them into human space, because clearly they're moving into human space for a reason. We just don't know why. So there has been a hint by the writers and Chris Roberts and Aaron Roberts that because it's based off of Roman history, why did the Vanduul move into Roman territory? The Vandals moved into Roman territory because they were being driven out by another group. Today we know them as the Huns. So they have implied that there might be another alien species out there, which is pushing the Vanduul into our space. And the fact that the Vanduul are scavengers, partially, and the technology that was used for something like regen is well beyond Vanduul's technological levels. And a lot of stuff that the Vanduul have is well above the levels they should have based off of the rest of their technology, that even the UEE thinks that some of the technology the Vanduul has is from other species that they either wiped out or raided from distant parts of the galaxy. So there are more aliens than just the Banu, the Vanduul, the Xi'an, and the Tavaran. We also know the Kurthaka exist, which are the mortal enemies of the Xi'an on the other side of the Xi'an Empire. But, you know, there could be more. Are other species like the Banu helping the humans against the Vanduul? To a degree. The Xi'an and the Tavaran hate the Vanduul. The Tavaran royally hate the Vanduul. The Tavaran, if there's one thing the Tavaran hate more than humanity, it's the Vanduul. They despise the Vanduul. Like, there is very much blood hate between the Vanduul and the Devarin. It's one way. The Vanduul don't even know the Devarin really exist, but the Devarin freaking they are very, very angry. Very angry birds. Where did the Banu get tachyon guns? We also don't know that. The Banu technology, let me put it this way. The Banu have had contact with the Xi'an since 1928. I don't think you heard me properly. The Banu and the Xi'an have known each other and about each other since the Roaring '20s. When we encountered the Banu, they didn't say shit about fuck about the Xi'an. They didn't tell us anything about the Xi'an because we didn't ask. Would the Devarin hate for the Vanduul stem from the large numbers of Devarin UE military service? Partially, but also because wherever the Devarin and the Banu, or the Banu, wherever the Devarin and the Vanduul are encounter each other, even in like places like Null, because like there was a Vanduul clan that invaded Null, which is a pirate system, but that system is effectively controlled by the Devarin. There's a pirate king. Yes, there is a pirate king in the Star Citizen universe, and it is a alien bird. This is the Devarin. I forget the name of his name, but he rallied the pirate clans together to fight back the Vanduul invasion and actually beat the Vanduul, like killed the Vanduul leader in Null. And it's one of the reasons why he's still the leader of Null. And like that's the sort of things like for wherever the Devarin and the Vanduul bump into each other in non-UEE space, they go at each other's throats. And Devarin are especially ruthless with the Vanduul. Did you find the One Piece? Yes, the One Piece is real. I'm gonna look him up. He's a fascinating dude. Neskis is his name. So the thing you have to understand about Null is that a long time ago, during the first Mezzer era, rebels attempted to sort of do hit and run attacks against the Mezzer regime, since the Mezzers were dictators. And a group of Devarin and human rebels worked together to fight against the Mezzers. And they were chased down to the Null system, which was a known pirate system, over the planet of Ashana, which is the only planet in the Null system that has a habitable environment. It's where the Copians come from, actually. And during this battle, the admiral who's in charge of the UEE fleet ordered his capital, his carrier, to kind of get the finishing blow, to get the glory of finishing off these rebel scum. Got a little too close to the atmosphere, and the ship careened into the atmosphere uncontrollably because it didn't have thrusters to keep it rated for atmosphere. And so that crashed capital ship remains on the surface of Ashana, where it's been turned into the main landing zone of the system. And is ruled over by, it is lived in by a group of Devarin and humans who are descendants of those rebels that fought against the first Mezzers, of which the current leader is named Neskis, who's a semi-dictator. That doesn't make sense. Wouldn't it be one of the first questions people ask? Are there other sentient races, and where are they? I mean, I just the joke about because they didn't ask is more of a joke. But the reality is that the Banu are very careful about what they say. They don't tell anybody information you don't need to know, because you got to pay them enough money to make them want to do it. And there's more than just information. It's also reputation. It's also rarity. Like there's a lot of stuff that you gotta go get into. And so the Banu just didn't say shit. In fact, when we first encountered the Vandul, the first thing that the advocacy did was go to the Banu and say, "What the fuck, man? Why didn't you tell us again? We asked you this already. Who the hell are these people?" And the Banu may or may not have already known who the Vandul were at that point. They probably did. But the Banu are famous for doing that. They just don't tell humans shit. They just don't want to tell us shit. That's another point. What if they go to trade with the Xi'an instead? They want to corner the market on things like information and trade. Like at the end of the day, the Banu are ruthless capitalists. And if you don't say the right thing or do the right thing, they're going to go with whatever makes them the most money or the most reputation. Banu are like Ferengi if the Ferengi were Labrador retrievers. They still want to make you happy, but they'll sell your kidney on the black market if you're not careful. Oh yeah, let me show you all the Tavaran. Here you go. This is what the Tavaran look like. They're the last alien species that's really not gotten fleshed out. Like the Banu are obviously in game with, at least partially with Wicklow. The Xi'an are in game in the sense because there's some models of the Xi'an in Squadron. These are still just concepts, even though the Tavaran are, because the Tavaran are more Star Citizen focused. This is what the Tavaran look like. So yeah, very bird-like. They wouldn't tell their own kids anything. How would you remember to tell us anything? Oh yeah, the Banu also don't keep history. The Banu think that history is stupid because it's a waste of space. Anything that isn't actively being used is discarded. So like they don't have a past. So if the Banu even knew where the tachyon guns, don't even know where their tachyon technology comes from. It just exists. Whoa, you can't just call them the B word. What was their religion called? Rijora. It's a very, it's heavily inspired by the, oh, what the hell's the name? Japanese martial philosophy. Bushido. It's very Bushido. Yeah. Like their temples are actually sparring centers. Like they have temples of worship, but those temples of worship are also martial training centers where they go to spar and fight and learn to fight as one. One of the coolest things about the Tavaran is that the Tavaran have a traditional. We know one of their traditional weapons, which I forget the name of it, but the traditional weapon is it's famous for being a traditional pirate Tavaran weapon, but it's effectively a mini polearm. It's got a mini poleaxe. It's got a spear tip. It's got a crow's hook and an axe, but it's the size of a like that big, like the size of a hatchet. It's like a hatchet version of a polearm. Halberd, yeah. Thank you, Corval, for those two gifted subs. We're going to finish this up here shortly, so I just want to make sure if you have any questions, comments, anything else like that about Star Citizen lore, let me know. For those of you wondering, I've been following Star Citizen lore for a very long time. I love the lore. I think it's very interesting and intriguing. I think the biggest downside of the lore is that the lore of Star Citizen has been created by 4 or 5, I think 5 total artists, writers minimum. There have been many other writers who've been brought in as contract writers for various stories and stuff like that in Jump Point. So I would say maybe a dozen or so writers have been involved in the Star Citizen project since its beginning. And of these writers, most of them have been working really hard to create these interesting stories and characters and this universe, and it just hasn't really been shown to the players yet. A lot of their work was in developing sort of a backstory so that when the game is released, people have something to grab onto. It's just there's nothing to grab onto right now because there's nothing in the game to even like look this stuff up. There's no, well, there is a Galactopedia, which is going to be added to the game eventually, but there's no like books you can find information in. There's no backstory. There's no NPCs talking about these backstories. We're only now starting to get some of them, like Dr. Yorit and his obsession with the Vanduul and regen and how Vanduul and regen are connected. The Shattered Blade and the difference, like the various conflicts in Nyx right now. Most of that stuff is pretty passing. There's not a lot of like deep lore to know that the Vanduul are bad. A lot of it is centered around the Vanduul. Why did the UE move all its fleet back to Earth? It's not that they moved their fleet, they moved the fleet celebrations to Earth. We don't know why, though. Do you know stuff about the weapons? Are wheel guns all gone? Is there futuristic cowboy pew-pews? There is the one that's going to make all weapons nerds mad, which is the Coda. There is a wheel gun. It is made by Castak Arms. It is just an internal wheel gun. There is a cylinder inside here, which is a rotating cylinder, a rotating wheel, as you could say. And it fires 50 cal pistol ammunition. Revolver, thank you. There are lots of problems with the Coda because it is, in fact, it does, in fact, eject spent shell casings, which doesn't make any goddamn sense. It's a revolver where you take the entire cylinder out and then replace it when you want new rounds in. And when you fire, a spent casing is sent flying. Just like, where the fuck would the spent casing even come out? My theory, the one that I think that would fix this, is if you remove the spent casings and model in spent casing, spent brass inside the revolver cylinder when you pull the cylinder out, is that this is in fact, or you just don't have revolver spent casings. It's just you just don't model the case. You just have a solid bullet. You just make the Coda fire caseless ammunition. Caseless ammunition does exist. It can work. The problem with it is very hot. But a revolver can solve some of those overheating issues. Plus, it's Castak Arms, and it's the future. Who the fuck knows how we cool off this shit? But it would be more science fiction and more somewhat reasonable if you say, yeah, it fires caseless ammo. Works better in space. Caseless ammo is one of those cool sci-fi ideas that nobody fucking uses, right? So why not? It's a chaos-powered gun powered by the rage of gun nerds. if you're throwing the cylinder out every time you're throwing out the heat, well, there you go. I don't know enough about revolver and caseless ammo issues, so. I'm actually doing a full video. I'm working with Fried Chicken and the Space Coder, who are both content creators, great content creators who do specific stuff on like weapons and armor in Star Citizen. Like I think Fried Chicken has one on the crossbow and like doing testing and stuff like that. So the idea is that I'm going to do sort of a lore breakdown of all of the manufacturers, the weapons and armors manufacturers. I'm getting to the point where I'm going through the weapons and I'm like, bearing alone is like 6 pages. And I'm like, maybe just do the weapons of Star Citizen and do the armor separately. So like the history of the founding of the company, then each of their weapons and their equipment and all that sort of thing. And then the idea is that interspersed between those, I'm going to have Fried Chicken or FT and Space Coder talk a little bit more about those weapons in game in terms of like their functionality in game, what they like about them, a little spiel about more of the meta aspect of the weapons rather than just the lore. So. Did he give the long-suffering Royal Armory guy to collab as well? He did a little bit of Star Citizen. I'd love for him to do the do some of the ballistic weapons. I'd love to see him do the P8 and the P4. I'd love to see his take on the P8 and the P4. Because the P4 originally started as literally the Space G36. It was effectively a G36 that had some greebles added to it. The H&K G36. And it's sort of evolved to beyond that, but it's still got its sort of H&K M4 origins. So I think the smart guns from Cyberpunk are the closest I've seen to what people think of when you say caseless ammunition, if that makes sense. Oh, I have a question. Was there any lore that explained why FT Eustace was mentioned in the old ARC armor sets? FT Eustace. Look that up. Like Fort Eustace? I don't see any of the original references to Orc. Maybe it's the Orc Mark IV. Mark 10, probably. Hmm. I'm not finding it in my notes or on the wiki. I'd have to see the original description. But if it mentions Fort Eustis, I wouldn't be surprised. So Clark Defense Systems is sort of evolved, but effectively it is the main weapon or armor manufacturer for the UE Marines and the UE Army. There was an army set. The Mark 10, I think, had an army set that you could get. There's the GCD Army. Hmm. No, I'm not really seeing any. Really seeing anything in the references. I'd have to see the references for it. Yeah, Fort Eustis. Let me look it up real quick. Let me see if I can't find the Fort Eustis. Nah, not coming out. Hmm. The thing to remember is that the United States existed in the Star Citizen universe. It simply evolved into what became known as the North American Alliance and then Americano, which is the current name of the state in the UEE is Americano, which includes the North America and South America. So, and of course, the capital of the UEE is New York. So, America is still very important in the UEE. So, any of the military facilities that would be under the United States would probably be transferred to the UEE military, or the UNE, then the UPE, then the UEE military. Would likely, so if Fort Eustis is used for like testing for anything, especially for like military hardware testing, yeah, it would make sense that it would be used. Fort Eustis might still be in use by the UE military to test military equipment. Does Star Citizen has different roles between the Army and Marines? Yes. So the Army is sort of they do invasion sometimes. Like I said, mentioned the UPE Army's invasion of Locke. But you can think of the Army more as the sledgehammer of humanity. Mostly the Army stays and defends planets. If the Army is moving to invade a planet, you fucked up. So it's normal to see the Marines. The Marines are sort of the light, quick reaction force. There's different various rules, or like the Marines have different various functions. They sort of act as sort of a hybrid force between the Navy and the UE Army. There are Marines on board Navy ships. The big important thing to understand about the UE Marines is that the UE Marines are not a volunteer force. They are a elite force. You do not get to join the Marines. The Marines choose you to join, and it's up to you to choose to join or not. So they're all handpicked. Every Marine is handpicked out of recruits from the Army or the Navy, which the Navy and the Army both hate. The Marines have their own fleet, or own fleets, but they are very specialized. Marines are still spread out amongst the Navy to protect the Navy, but these are like highly trained in comparison to modern Marines. And of course, the Marines have special forces, like 6th Platoon is a special forces unit. It's kind of like Marine Raiders sort of thing, or Force Recon. And there are, of course, the Marines, which the Army as well, who are attached to the Starlift Command, which acts as a QRF for any point in the galaxy. So yeah, they have their own Bengal. Yeah, they have their own planet. The planet the Marines live on is a frozen ice ball, but it is only no one goes to that planet unless you're a Marine. There is literally a do not come past this zone marker around that planet, and if you come past that zone, the Marines will shoot you. Without warning. You don't get a warning. You pass that marker, they kill you. And even if you land on the planet the Marines headquarters is at, it's an ice ball. It is barely above habitable. And most Marine recruits are sent to the surface of the planet for their training. Like once you go through training, you get pulled out to be selected for Marines. They take you to the planet. They push you out into the cold and say, we'll see you in a month. And you're given enough materials and equipment to survive. And your goal is to survive. And they monitor you to make sure you're okay. But it's basically throw you through the wolves to see if you do okay. And if you survive and you prove you're good enough, they bring you into their base, which is an underground, basically city where the Marines headquarters is. And then you go through further training there. But it's so rare to see, like, Marines don't take pictures. It's against the law for them to record anything in there. And the few pictures we have gotten out of them have been the few photographers who've been allowed to visit and take pictures. And most of it is the exterior, not the interior of the city. So it's a very secretive sort of facility. The Marines of Star Citizen are sort of a cross between like modern Marines and like Australian Marines or British Marines or United States Marines. A cross between them and like the Spartan program of Halo or the Space Marines, the Astartes of 40K. Like, they're not genetically modified, but like they are highly specialized in what they do. Where do you get to all this info? So Fohammer, a lot of this information is on their website. RobertSpaceIndustries.com. If you go to their ComLeak section, there is an entire section, which I believe it's called, let me show you actually, pretty cool. Fun to do. I don't get to do this live a lot, so you get to see where you can find this. So here we are on the front page. So this is what the front page looks like. If you go down here to Comlinks, you will see it says Comlink all. You got a bunch of different stuff here. But if you go to channels and you go to Spectrum Dispatch and you hit search, sometimes this works, you get all of this: Lore Masters Community Questions, Profile Anvil Aerospace, Galactopedia updates, Profile 34,000 Beats, Gladius, Idris, Wildstar Racing, Galactopedia updates, Lore Masters Community Guides. The further you go down, Mirai, Whitley's Guide, Vulture, 890 Jump, Hercules, Pyrotechnic Amalgamated, Unification Wars, Jerry, which is the first Bennu we ever encountered, Whitley's Guide. And as you get down further, so like Secret of Hurston Dynamics, Transmission from the Manu Protectorate, Invictus Launch Week, Widow, the drug, Clark Defense Systems, the Terrapin, Red Festival, Advert Block, Clean Shot. So these are like, this stuff is like transmissions. So like it's transcripts of like live broadcasts. So it's like, howdy folks, Craig Burton here in Salzone of Clean Shot, the show that delivers you the latest news and reviews on today's haulers needs, and that haulers needs to know. Alongside me, as always, Skinny, who's literally packing his bags for Intergalactic Aerospace Expo's speed. What's that? The show started and you're over here rooting for luggage. Would you rather I double check that we got all our gear? You get the idea, right? So this is sort of like a podcast or a broadcast of some kind. All of this is done on Spectrum, the in fiction Spectrum. But we're talking, that's 4 years ago. I can keep scrolling. And the further I go back, the more it's just more lore. All of this is lore. This is just from 2021. This goes back to 2012. They used to do a lore post a week. We're still 8 years away. Still got 8 more years of lore. This is 2017. Ooh, this is one of my favorite ones. So Untold Tales is sort of like Unsolved Mysteries, sort of the Star Citizen versions of the Unsolved Mysteries. This one's fun because this one's talking about Octavia Watt, 127-year-old Octavia Watt. She lived in the Farron system when she came home after Traveler's Day celebrations. Traveler's Day is a complicated thing to explain, but it's sort of a Star Citizen. It's a religion in Star Citizen amongst humans. A drop pod crashed through her home. And inside that drop pod, a Marine drop pod, was a dead Marine who didn't die from the crash of the drop pod, but died 100 years before. No, 200 years before. There's no record of the Marine. They know who the Marine was, but they don't know why he died. They don't know why he was in the drop pod. They don't know why he fell, like why he died in this drop pod and why it took him 200 years to finally hit the ground. Because all the information about his last mission was classified. Like I said, this is a good, like, you know, page, 2 pages of writing. That's what happens when you have a lore team of 1 to 5 writers writing over the course of 13, 14 years. Plus brochures, Whitley's guides, which were articles which also ended up in Jump Point. Every ships used to have brochures that released over them that had lore attached to those brochures. And on top of all of that, there's also the Galactopedia. Well, the theory behind that Marine and why he crashed through the roof was because Farron was being heavily persecuted during the end of the Mezzer era, because the workers of Farron had been mad that Hurston basically poisoned the water, and Hurstons were good friends, at least that branch of the Hurstons were good friends with the Mezzers. So when those Farron workers began to strike for better conditions, the Mezzers basically said, you're rebels and we're going to put you down. So they started to like round up people, and the Marines were called out multiple times to do tactical strikes, classified tactical strikes against basically strike leaders. You know, like labor leaders, to sort of like kill labor leaders. Yeah. And that's just one story. There are 13 years of stories. Ah, cool. Space Bickertons. Yeah, kind of. So glad I found this channel. Love lore, and this has been great to listen to while hauling. Like and subscribe. Feel free to listen. I've got about 3 hours worth of like sort of a narrative through line from beginning to end stories of Star Citizen lore, called The Complete History of Star Citizen lore. It's a channel, or there's a playlist of it you can listen to that kind of takes you from the beginning, where our history kind of bleeds into the Star Citizen history, like where the divergence happens, up to about the first 500 years of lore. I'm gonna complete it, but the closer we get to the current day in lore, the more content there is. What's your take on the we need a new Mezzer flyers at DefenseCon? The fundamental reality of the Mezzers is that whenever I hear people say that, like this is one of those weird critiques I've heard of the Star Citizen universe, which is that it doesn't make sense that if the Mezzers were so evil and nobody really liked the Mezzers, and we kicked out the Mezzers, why did we keep the empire that they created? Why did we keep the name? And the answer is humanity, the rulers of humanity, didn't fundamentally change the UEE. They simply were mad that the Mezzers were making their lives harder. So the system the Mezzers created is still there. We're still living under Messer rule. It's just the Messers are no longer around. The system only reformed so that they didn't need a Messer, but the same political parties, the same political ideals are all still around. So the whole, what I'm calling neo-Messerites, which is a movement where we're seeing in DefenseCon, we're seeing it in the splash screen, where like neo-Messerites were interrupting a Invictus Day celebration in Castra. It's just something that I've been anticipating for a long time, which is there are people who still want to return to Messer. They want to return to the Messer era. And here's the secret. Here's the secret. There is still a living Messer. The last living Messer is the sister of the last Messer emperor who's now dead, or imperator who's now dead. He was named Linton. His sister was named Fiona. Fiona disappeared before Linton was killed. We know she ran for her life. In the Star Citizen universe, there is extensive technology to preserve someone for long term, stasis couches, stasis pods, which can effectively keep you in suspended animation for as long as there's power. So I wouldn't put it past CIG to put Fiona Messer into suspended animation, and that she's going to show up again at some point in the Star Citizen story as sort of a thorn in the side of the UEE, the last Messer returning to take over the UEE. She was was deep within some gang or something, right? So if you look at the Xenothreat gang, Xenothreat just sort of shows up, takes over large sections of Pyro, then manages to get enough power and influence to start attacking the UEE in Stanton. It's a not so subtle hint that there's somebody is funding Xenothreat. Xenothreat's getting funding from somewhere. And a lot of their ideals match like almost directly with Messerites, with Messer ideals. They're anti-xeno, or they're very xenophobic. They want complete and total control over. Here, let me play this for you. Actually, because I actually have the video to give you an idea of what a Messer beliefs are.
Attention!
This was an actual message sent out by Xenothreat during the original Xenothreat invasion. Give you an idea of what this was, the context for this. This is the guy who's speaking is known as the Commander. He's the head of Xenothreat.
Attention, people of Stanton. A great injustice has been done to you. For decades, the spineless bureaucrats of your government have been selling you and your fellow citizens piece by piece to the alien scum outside our borders and to their corporate masters within. Their greed only matched by the absolute disregard for the values that made humanity great in the first place. My brothers and sisters have watched them feed on the dying carcass of the Empire for long enough. With the passage of the Human Xi'an Trade Initiative, it's clear that the government is happy to sell the final parts of humanity into servitude. The time has come to send a message that we will not consume their lies anymore, that we are the ones in charge. Stanton will be the first step in a revolution to take back the soul of the Empire. You will be witnesses. We are Xenothreat. Out.
The only thing he's missing is the Weather Dominator. Never thought of it being an actual and being a Messer synthesizer or an actual Messer funding them. That's the play. They played that on like the screens of stations. Like, here, let me get the actual trailer from that patch. This was the actual trailer from the patch. Let me see if I can. That's not the right one. This is a good one, though. At least the beginning is.
Xenothreat raiders broken into the Stanton system and attacked vital resupply convoys. It is our mission to repel their forces and recover these supplies.
Be advised, we are 10 clicks from wreck site.
Engaging.
Hades, we're engaged with about 6 fighters. Over.
Flash walk.
Contact front.
Contacts rear.
Contact down.
Nice work.
The Xenothreat Idris has just shown up. Be advised, the enemy Idris is wide open for the assault. Launch the boarding attack now.
Drop.
Multiple contacts in hangar.
On your left! Hero, get upstairs.
Take a left down this corridor.
Contact.
Grenade!
Almost certainly the measures behind Xenothreat. This one was a little bit more. It was the return of Xenothreat. Let me see if I can find. This was the.
Attention, people of Stanton. We are the ones in charge. We are Xenothreat.
This is the first CDF event. So it's important to understand that the Xenothreat is sort of represents this idea of humanity first, humanity always. Like all other species, we need to kick them out. They don't need to exist. We need to give total power to a single powerful leader to get things done. And or like basically an oligarchy. That's what the kind of the Messers represented. And the closest thing to the Messers in modern politics in the UEE are the centralists, who are very Messer adjacent. They like just stop short of the pure xenophobic messaging, but they are very xenophobic. They're not a very popular party in the UEE though, but they are still one of the big three parties in UEE politics. So it's important to note that like a centralist extremist attempted to assassinate the imperator failed, but attempted to assassinate the Imperator right before Xenothreat showed up. And Xenothreat has very similar rhetoric to the Centralists. There is a lot of centralist like belief structure, which is very, especially extreme centralist belief structure, which is all over the UEE. And now Meserites, neo-Meserites are showing up to protest and actively disrupt UEE events. I'm just saying, yeah, once is a coincidence. Happening once is a coincidence. Happening at all the damn time is a pattern. So it's clear that there's something going on with the return of Meserite ideals, if not the Mesers themselves. Where are the centralists based? Earth. So the three major parties are the centralists, which are sort of a more conservative party, return to old school values, sort of ideas. And they believe that Earth is the capital and should remain the capital of the UEE and all the things around that. On their extreme left is the transitionalists, who were sort of the remnants of the revolutionaries who overthrew the Messers. They believe that humanity's capital should be moved to Terra. They believe in more integration with aliens, not less. Extending more, like getting rid of the citizenship system, that kind of thing. And then in between them, sort of a moderate party, which is the biggest and most popular party, are called the Universalists. Universalists believe that the government power should still be used to help people, but the government should be the one that's wielding the power. So some extend some protections to corporations and let the corporations have some individual sway. Like, for instance, the Universalists were the ones that sold Stanton System. But when the corporations step a little bit too out of line, they smack them down and force them to like play within their rules. Okay. Terra isn't Earth, no. So you've got Sol and Earth, and then you've got Terra, which is a different system, which is sometimes known as Terra Nova. They just simplified to Terra. Kirstens are centralists, yes. Crusader are transitionalists, and likely ArcCorp and Microtech are probably universalists in terms of their leanings politically. Do you think citizenship is really going to take off that well if somebody doesn't really want to play Squadron 42 because citizenship, otherwise it could be a pain in the butt to get? No. So citizenship, you get citizenship through the main story of 1.0. The main story of 1.0 ends with your player getting citizenship. We also know the main plot of the story of 1.0, or at least know the theme, which is the which is the coming war between Terra and Earth. There's a couple of things that are inevitably going to happen because they've already told us it's going to happen. One of them is the UEE Civil War. And it's going to split between those who are loyal to Terra and those who are loyal to Earth. Service doesn't actually guarantee citizenship. Service can get you citizenship if the UEE citizenship boards decide that your service was grand enough to enable citizenship. So maybe you served in the military and your father is, I don't know, a Hurston. Maybe you did some things here and there which were good, but maybe wouldn't be considered exceptional. But your dad's a Hurston. Maybe we slip you citizenship because, part of the right family. But you did do some service. But if you're just a poor kid off of the streets of New Junction and Low, you don't do the right amount of service, well, you're just a nobody. Unless you did something that was really impressive, I don't know if you deserve citizenship. And that is literally how citizenship system works. I know it's a good time. It's always good to quote Starship Troopers, but it's important to understand that this is not Starship Troopers. This is worse. This is far more corrupt than even the worst interpretation of Starship Troopers. When I say the UEE is a corrupt system that's going to fail, I'm telling you right now, it's a corrupt system that's going to fail. The problem is that most people don't see that, because when I say an entire star system is owned by mega corporations, think about that for 2 minutes and tell me if that's the idea of a normal functioning government, that they handed over massive territory to the sole arbitrarship of mega corporations. This would be like Detroit being controlled by an entire mega corporation. Not exactly a utopian idea of the future. Of course, those of you who know what I mean, but I say why I mentioned Detroit, you know what I'm talking about. OCP, baby. Yeah. So that gives you kind of an idea. Like, the UEE is dying. It's a dying empire. There's no saving it. The question is, what do you salvage out of the ashes? Do you prop up parts of it to keep it going so you can help people? Do you let the whole thing burn down and hope something new pops out? How much do you want to prop up while the Vanduul are invading and burning and pillaging everything around? Who's going to stop the Vanduul from coming in? How about the Xi'an? The Xi'an, even though they're more friendly, could still take advantage of a destabilized UEE and invade. The Devarin could come back at any time too. The idea is that the universe of Star Citizen is a dystopia. Things are going to go bad. They're already going bad, and they're going to get worse. And that's why, but that's actually perfect for you, the player, because it means the players have a huge impact on the outcome of what's going to happen. You're going to be in a unique position where you'll be in the right place at the wrong time. And what you do should have an impact on where things go. I'm just chilling with my comrades and Nix. Based in People's Republic pilled. There is a particular it of lore about two very distinct processes becoming a citizen. One got it just because he came from an influential family, and the other was poor and model citizen by all accounts, but didn't get it. The People's Alliance, they claim that they don't have centralized government, but run by a consensus and committee. I can't wrap my head around the decentralized government. How and why? So the People's Alliance is a commune. It's a commune as a government. So they have a centralized council, and the council can make decisions, but those decisions aren't binding unless the entire residents, all the residents of the People's Alliance, of Levski, and the people who are part of the People's Alliance make a decision for it. So you can think of it as like a proper democracy, like everyone makes a vote, but they do have leaders who represent that vote outside of the People's Alliance. There's a very specific, like, you cannot become a resident of Levski unless you have a very specific allowance. Like, very few people are actually residents of Levski. You are not a resident of Levski if you choose to spawn there. You simply live in Levski. You're not a resident of Levski. But you were granted all protections that residents of Levski have. You think of it kind of like a citizenship system. but they limit that partially because they want to make sure they know who people are who are going and where. But also they're doing they limit it because they just don't have enough resources. They're a very, very resource stripped location, and so they have to deal with the limited amount of stuff they have. Direct democracy. They're kind of like a direct democracy communism. They're like communism if it was done by direct democracy. Chaos breeds opportunity. Exactly. I still want to join the Moraine. I do too. The Moraine are sort of like they're a cult. They're what you do if you take radical revolutionary, leftist revolutionaries, and you say, we're all a family here. We're a very tight family. They're anarchists, but they're sort of an anarchist cult because they all call themselves the family, and you are brother or sisters in the family. You have to do very specific things to get in with the family. They all look like Vin Diesel. That was the joke. That was the joke we used to make, was that it was just Vin Diesel. Good night, Gene. They remind me of the Belter faction in The Expanse. Yes, yes, very similar to the Belters. All of the like factions of Levski feel very Belter inspired. They might have been, because when a lot of these factions were being written originally was when the original Expanse series was being released, but even by the time the original stories of Star Citizen were being released, including Levski with the People's Alliance, the books had been popular by then. I just saw someone in Global say one Viltrumite versus the UE Retribution death battle. Let's go. It depends on the Viltrum, but I think the Viltrumite still wins. Thanks for hanging out, y'all. I should probably wrap it up myself. It is past 10:30 my time, so I should probably go. Look, the Marines seems more stable and reasonable than the Pyro Rats, and I support the Pyro Rats unironically. The Fire Rats are great. If there was a faction that I would align with unanimously, unequivocally, it would be the Fire Rats. The Fire Rats, unironically, are fucking awesome. Next week, probably. Think we join any faction down the road? I hope so. One of the things, I'll leave you off with this. One of the things I'm a little concerned about with Star Citizen is that CIG has created dozens of different small factions. Great little interesting, unique factions in Pyro. There are at least 5 or 6 different factions of NICS, including the Citizens for Prosperity. The CFP are in NICS. The 4 different mega corporations, plus like the Dead Saints, the what I call the Clinshaw Par Syndicate, the Nine Tails, the Dusters. There's all of these unique factions with interesting backstory and lore, and even like uniforms. The problem is that CIG seems to be very dead set on trying to simplify the faction system and drag all of these factions into one like glob factions, and are also very against negative reputation. So what it seems like right now, which I'm hoping is simply just a matter of a lack of tools and not a lack of will, is that CIG seems to be having good guys and bad guys. The good guys are the ones you can work with. Like, I always forget the name of the current mercenary group in Nyx that everyone works with, or like, gosh, what are they called? The mining group you can work with for Rockbreaker. Those are the good guy factions. But then the bad guy factions are like Nine Tails, Xenothreat, Moraine, Shattered Blade, which you can never join. You always fight, and they'll always be the enemy. With Star Citizen attempting to be a sandbox MMO, I'm afraid that this simplification means that they don't fully understand how interesting sandboxes are. Because you have this reputation system, which is an idea that goes back to the earliest of Chris Roberts' open world games like Star Citizen Privateer or Star Citizen Wing Commander Privateer, where your reputation will determine your standing with the various different factions. And having reputation with one faction would lower your reputation with another faction. Thus, you would have to make decisions on what to do. It would be far more interesting if you could join Xenothreat, but then there are complications. The fact that you've joined Xenothreat means that you can no longer land at any location other than the Xenothreat locations in Pyro. You're not welcome in Stanton, and you're not welcome in Nyx. You effectively joined a criminal organization. You are now public enemy number one. The only people who like you are Xenothreat. So it would force you out of normal society, but you can still make that choice. And having negative reputation is a way of allowing for those choices to have impact on the players in terms of what they can access. Not just -1, I'm going to shoot you in terms of reputation, but like degrees of negative reputation where it's like people don't like you, but they'll tolerate you. You might hear them say snide things about you. They might charge you more money because they know who you are. Eventually the factions will start charging you more money for refueling, rearming, repairing, and even like having your docking fees and such, to you not being allowed to land at locations, but you're not being shot at yet. You're just like, you're banned from locations, to we shoot you on sight. That sort of degrees of negative reputation, I think, is vital to create an interesting universe where your actions have consequences. But unfortunately, right now, it seems like CIG is allergic to that idea because they're afraid of having those sorts of limitations would scare away the normies. And they want the normies in because they want to keep making money. And I'm afraid that direction is where they're going because of what they've said in the recent past, that this is sort of a change of what they originally were going to do. But then again, part of me, the hopium inside of me, says that a lot of these actions are more because they just don't have the new reputation system in yet. So they can't really do a lot of that nuance because there's no reputation to actually do the thing that I just described. So once they have that new reputation system in, they can start doing that sort of sandbox sort of experience. But up until then, it's just sort of a, hey, come and enjoy the game, test out a little bit of things here and there, see how things work. So I can't even piss off CFP into hostility anymore. Yeah. And I think that is the biggest concern I have narratively with Star Citizen, is that if they don't do that, it will hurt how stories were told. It's not the death knell of Star Citizen stories, but I think it makes the stories a lot less interesting because it becomes less of players interacting with the universe and more of a, fun theme park ride where you kind of are along for the ride. But we'll see. I hope they do that, but if they added that right now, it would lock you out of so much gameplay with only 2.5 systems available. I mean, even with 5 systems available, it would still lock you out. But that's fine if it's your choice. As long as they have a way or a time mission to fix negative rep, Yeah, they used to do that. They used to have stuff where you could like pull your rep back up if you got too negative. But all right, y'all. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this, hit that follow button here on Twitch. If you're watching this on YouTube, like the video, subscribe for more content, and hit the bell icon to be notified when these release. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments below. And like I always say, remember, ex Historia ad Astra.